When I speak about porn, I kind of explain it like this. Imagine you're about to watch a porn clip, and before doing so, the actors come on the screen and they say, "The porn you're about to watch is filmed by us, and we just wanted to let you know that I have a splitting headache." And the other actor in the scene has to rush because they need to pick up their kids right after this. But anyways, porn, they're always ready to go each time you load up the site. But our partners, we experience fluctuation, challenges. I didn't sleep last night. I am very stressed, but communicating that to the partner so that they don't take it as a hurt. I see you and I want to be intimate with you. And I'm being forthright that I am not in this space. So if we talk about what we're interested in and what our fantasies are and what we'd like to explore together, we might not need it to go to some of those other realms in the first place. I think a lot of this is overcoming our fear and shame in our society of not feeling safe and comfortable about talking to sex.
Hi, I'm attorney Chris Bruce. I'm here with Evan Kotler. He is a therapist in Boca Raton, Florida. Evan specializes in working with clients and couples on addictions, especially sexual addictions and just overall general couples therapy. It's just a really interesting conversation on challenges in sex, challenges in relationships, some of the pitfalls of pornography, and ultimately how to have a great sexual relationship with your partner. Let's get into it. Evan, let's kick this topic off. Why is the topic of sex and relationship dynamics so important in this modern world we're living in?
It's whether it's the modern world or any world, what's more important than our relationships? What do we do all this for? All this work and schooling. Our relationships are most important. And a big part of our relationships and our humanity is our sexual selves and our sexual identity. And although we've been sexual beings throughout our evolution, the way in which we're having sex and the way that sexual changes have occurred through technology has drastically changed our relationships and the brain.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. And maybe I'm starting to date myself in this, but like when I came out of school, out of college, like Facebook hadn't been invented yet, popped up in law school, but now I'm learning as a divorce lawyer about all these different computer programs that allow people to start having relationships with each other. We got the Tinders of the world, the Bumbles, we got open relationships, thruples, online dating. We got stuff I probably haven't learned about yet that hopefully my kids don't teach me about. Like, how is that changing relationship dynamics?
It's a great question. And we've had changes in relationship dynamics throughout our history. And when you mention open relationships, so how did we even get to monogamy? And when I think of relationship styles or dynamics, I think of it as a menu with popular items that are often chosen. But in this case, it's a menu that's often not presented. What did we see in our family home growing up? We saw maybe a mom and dad, two dads, whatever that dynamic is. Did anybody ask themselves the question? And I encourage clients to ask themselves, which relationship dynamic is right for me and which one am I capable of living? Because somebody might want monogamy, but they might struggle with it. And there's reasons for that because we have ideas in our society about what relationships should be, what family should be. But the human brain can often have a different experience, and that plays a role into it.
Evan, you were talking about choosing a relationship dynamic, what's right for the person. And I guess it's actually I've never heard somebody mention that. It sounds pretty interesting to me. Like how does somebody even go about starting to do that?
Having questions and posing them to themselves and having conversations with a partner. Everything from about exploring compatibility to interest. When I did group therapy for years, I would do women's groups, I would do men's group, I would co-ed groups. I had opportunities to ask audiences, groups about different preference styles. And when you get people answering questions and that safety is there, you learn quite a bit. So I learned that a lot of men in those groups might have preferred to have opportunities to have sex outside of a relationship, but that was only if they would be given permission. That would be if an ideal situation is, yeah, my girlfriend's bisexual. So my hope is that I'm going to either get to watch or be brought in on that. It's a very a selfish approach rather
Hmm.
than wanting the partner to experience what is pleasurable for them. They're looking, how can I get a gain out of it? And the most common, if you think of it like this, one of the most common relationship dynamics in our country is what's called non-consensual non-monogamy. And another way of saying that is Cheating.
Yeah.
Cheating is very common. When we're in this monogamous system, well, if I ask for permission and you're not into it, oh, relationship is over. But if I have some sort of secret affair, I can have that desire fulfilled, but there's a consequence there. The shame and guilt that someone experiences in stepping out on their family and partner. And then if or when, and it's a lot of when people get caught, it brings a wave of betrayal trauma that's devastating to the partners.
So, like, to me, as I'm listening to some of this, there's a couple thoughts running through my head, and it's like, okay, it's like maybe in a perfect world, somebody would think through where they want their kind of ideal relationship dynamic to be, like before they're in a relationship or as they're in their early, at least stages of establishing one with somebody, and then there's probably people that, like, I imagine maybe the majority of people, you can correct me off, that starts thinking about this stuff 30 years into a relationship with kids, families, connections, all that. So, like, how do people start processing this? I don't know, this was probably a question we could talk about for hours, but like, should they be trying to do this earlier in life? What if they haven't? Where do they start?
I'll give you an example of a client I worked with years ago where he had a high school sweetheart. They ended up getting married. And through the length of their 20-year marriage, they had short conversations that turned into longer ones. And they didn't do anything, they didn't put it into action, but they learned a lot. They listened, they understood that they were attracted and aroused and had great life and sex life together, but they were honest about the attraction that remained for other people or interests that they had that their partner might be interested in a way that didn't promote controlling behavior or jealousy. And then slowly they went in the shallow end of the pool and started exploring different communities and getting educated and meeting people and having conversations, going to munches, they're called. And then over time, they were able to explore different dynamics, what worked for them. It was a beautiful transition over time. I think when people hear open relationship, it can sound really scary. Like you're just going to do this whenever you want with whomever you want. No. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of our monogamous relationships, they don't have very clear boundaries other than like, don't flirt with anybody, don't do anything inappropriate, don't cheat on me. But there's a lot of cheating adjacent behaviors that can occur. Could be emotional cheating. There's what about porn and porn content, subscriptions to OnlyFans. I notice you're following a lot of local women on Instagram, and I'm feeling a certain way about it. So when in non-monogamous relationships, they tend to have very clear and firm boundaries around what fidelity is, where monogamous couples might learn that on the tail end when the hurt has already been there. And we can discuss that
Yeah.
more in detail around things that weren't discussed early on that start to come up, things that I see in couples therapy quite a bit.
Yeah, and I guess I imagine you must see a lot of this stuff of evolving, maybe even quickly, and over the last couple of years with some of these online platforms like the Instagram you just
Yeah.
mentioned, the OnlyFans, some of this stuff. I imagine that's probably creating conversations in your office.
Absolutely. I think the biggest difference, Chris, of how this is influencing relationship is if someone's watching a porn clip, that porn might have been filmed 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It's sexual, it's very one-sided. But now we have this unique opportunity where we can have a relationship with our porn. I'm following and liking and interacting and talking to this person that I'm engaged with in a sexual way. It's a relationship and is also transactional. I had a client get very upset at her partner. I thought we were strapped for cash. And I find this subscription, right? I'm waiting for our relationship to evolve, and this is happening. So I've noticed that part is that Instagram, OnlyFans, it's too close. It's sort of like if we went to the movies and you looked at actors on the screen with your partner, like they're pretty hot. Our partners aren't going to be like, I'm jealous because you might get with them, right? But when we look at what's around us or what we can actually connect to and interact with, it's relational, and that creates a hurt that wasn't there prior with just porn. Not that porn doesn't cause that hurt. It can absolutely, and it does in many cases.
It does. It does. And maybe it's worth just talking for a moment on, the issue of porn itself and how it affects a relationship. I mean, you're a therapist for people who are processing relationship issues, sexual, matters, and the interplay between them. But I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people out there that are, maybe I'm talking from the male side of things, it's like, okay, it's just porn. So what? I watch OnlyFans. I love my wife. Like, what does this
Yes.
have to do with anything? Why the concern? And how does it affect these relations?
Yes. It's the word you said, Chris, right there. It's just porn. When we put that word just in front of anything, it minimizes or legitimizes it as being, it's just this. Would you ever say it's just fentanyl?
That's a good line. Yeah.
And so there's not an elementary school kid in this country of a certain age that doesn't know that smoking cigarettes is harmful and what it does to the body. But there are physicians in this country that have no idea of the impact that porn has on the brain. It is a drug. It is a drug that we are experiencing and accessing in massive capacities, and it alters our brain chemistry. And we don't know that. We don't learn that until sometimes decades later. And so I could sort of explain how porn impacts the brain and relationships. But first, I want to say that I'm not anti-porn. I'm pro-sex, pro-intimacy, and pro-love. Time and time again, I see that the more porn that's being watched, the less intimacy, sex, and love is being experienced in a relationship. But with that being said, and I mentioned opiates just a moment ago, I do prescribe porn in certain cases to certain clients and certain couples. But when I do, it's like I would anticipate a doctor prescribing opiates when medically necessary. Porn has a place in our society. It's here. Right? I'm in favor of sex workers having the legitimacy of doing their work. But what I'm not in favor of is that every single client that I've ever asked or anybody that I've ever talked to, what age were you exposed to porn at the first time? Not a single one of them said over 18, which is what the label on those old VHSs that were around
Yeah.
when I was growing up. So when are they watching? 13, 14, 12. The latest was probably 16 of my clients. So it's not that it's about the morality question of it's what is this doing to our brain? And it's doing a lot. Like think of the difference between the county fair and an
Yeah.
amusement park. We got a lot of amusement parks in Florida. If we ride these roller coasters and this intensity, our brain lights up with excitement, novelty, intensity. And then if we were to leave that park and go to the county fair, and I don't want to describe our partners as the county fair,
Yeah.
but whatever they are is they can't compete with the amusement park. And so what an individual does when they watch porn is they sync their arousal system to the porn. There is arousal in the brain, interest. They watch material that contains endless novelty, and they then masturbate and orgasm to this content, creating this link, aroused by this and orgasming to this. Then when they attempt to have sex with a partner, their partner, as amazing and connected and beautiful as they may be, they cannot compete with a drug. Nobody can. So I'll get phone calls from partners saying, my partner's unable to stay hard during sex with me. But I asked him if he stays hard when he watches porn. And he said, yes. I found that confusing. So here's an example of the brain. It's not the penis that is at issue here. They would go to a urologist, get the ED medication, and come back and still struggle to get erect.
Really?
It's the brain that got depleted. It's sort of like somebody that's on meth and then gets off of it. They might feel pretty depressed because they're not riding the highs anymore. Porn is very much the same way. It triggers our evolutionary response to new mates. In previous periods of our human evolution, we might be in tribal bands of up to 150 people. There's not much novelty there after a bit.
Yeah.
So now we have a partner that we see, that we live with, perhaps that we have had sex with thousands of times. But in my pocket, a few seconds of clicking away, I get to see the most novel, exciting, and intense sexual material that the human brain, any brain, has ever been exposed to. And this is new because when we go back to the Playboy under the mattress in the 70s and a dial-up connection in the 90s or a VHS store in the 90s and early 2000s, the game changed with internet technology. And this is what's part of the story of what's impacting our relationships. And that's just the brain. If we get into the content, there's a whole other conversation there.
And I guess that's a couple things come to mind, and I'm thinking, well, what about the content? And maybe we'll circle back to that. But I think probably a lot of people listening to what you've just said or might be thinking, so what should I just not watch? Is it like just say no to porn? Is there like a safe way to do it if you're in a relationship? Like I imagine there's multiple questions or multiple answers depending on the circumstances. But I mean, what's I guess the general prescription with this?
For the clients that I see, a majority of them, abstinence is the goal.
Yeah.
Because, like any addiction, if that's what it is, where they started is not where they are. And they're not having fun anymore. It isn't about pleasure. They're using it to cope with stress, to avoid pain, to escape, to deal with boredom. A lot of my clients have high stressful jobs, they're professionals. And porn was there in the beginning. It was there when they were 12 years old and were pressured athletically or academically. They had this secret space that nobody knew about that provided them this outlet, this release, and it felt good. But that boy grew up, he started dating, and his partner wasn't as interested in replaying the type of porn that he was watching, which comes to the
Yeah.
content. There's this great book called Boys and Sex and Girls and Sex, written by a journalist. And she interviews young men and women, and porn is one of those topics. And there's this young boy who's around 15 years old, and he said, I was watching a lot of porn, and I was sitting in my high school class one day, and I started to notice I started to visualize cum on the faces of the female students. And I thought, what is happening? And he realized this was a result of the porn influencing his brain to sexualize all situations. He cut out the porn and that went away. There's an episode of Friends where this is also similar. There's an episode where they access free porn, and Joey and Chandler are coming home and they're like, I went to the bank and the teller didn't want to have sex with me. Right? It was connected to the way that porn influences. There's this feedback loop. So imagine high school kid in class sees attractive person, checks out social media, gets the bathing suit pictures, gets the gym pictures, has access to get a little bit more through watching porn of something similar. They do that, they go back to class, the loop kicks in again.
So, and for somebody maybe that's in the loop, like how do they get out of it? And I'm just thinking myself, I've been trying to be on like a health journey the last year. I've been lucky to have my wife with it, getting over the hill of 40, time to get real with kids. I want to see grandkids one day. I mean, like with the sugary foods, and reading a lot of health books, or like, well, when you eat the processed foods and the sugary foods, you just like become an animal and you want more, and basically eat the broccoli and protein, and maybe you won't crave the Snickers bars and the beer anymore as much, because more of the added sugar just makes you want more of the added sugar. Is it like that with porn, or how do people like make this transition towards cutting this out?
I oftentimes say, let the pain push you and the prize pull you. The pain that pushes people into porn or sex addiction recovery is that it isn't fun. It's shame-filled and painful. When they give it up, just like giving up any drug, they're likely to go through some time of withdrawal. That withdrawal can have physical consequences, such as the inability to get hard for a period of time or struggle with things like premature ejaculation. But just like any person that's addicted to a process or a substance, when they go through that period, there's a recalibration that's occurring in the brain. My clients report erections are firmer, they're lasting longer, and they're actually hungry for their partner because their arousal circuitry is tied to their partner once again. The frequency of sex is going up, satisfaction. I also work with clients to be able to, like, when it comes to the content, I have a lot of shame to talk about it. Like, would you be interested in that? Could I bring up? It brings a beautiful conversation to gain interest and preferences. And maybe they're not into everything, but that intimacy that's built, if this is a part of myself that I've been keeping secret, beautiful things happen when people lay down porn. Think of what would it be like to crave the things that we already have? It would be very different, right? Imagine whether it's clothes, shoes, cars, like I had this. I once really wanted it. And now I'm thinking of all these other stuff that I want. And I'm going to have the same relationship with that, more and novel. And in a relationship, we have an opportunity that the longer we're with someone together, different things will fluctuate. You mentioned children and grandchildren, the complications of cohabitation, but the intimacy, the strength, the communication, all can foster a really healthy and satisfying sex life. When people are watching porn, it robs them of that time and time again.
I think you're you were saying it, just maybe to circle back to something, there's the porn and the cycle that it can have, but the content of some of this porn, maybe
Yeah.
I detected a little bit of maybe an inference that it's unrealistic, or that can start having, causing some other issues in relationships. So, reading you right, I know we're not in person here for this one, but
Yeah.
is that kind of what you're getting to?
Absolutely, Chris. The content matters. And there's an interesting thing that we all have access to. Pornhub, one of the biggest porn sites on the planet, produces statistics that are accessible to anybody. It will tell which country and which state is watching what and how long. It's a lot of information because we can look at this year to year and see trends. The trends I'm seeing are heavily humiliation based. There is a lot of technological aspects to porn that weren't there before. For example, I'll just throw this out. Have you ever heard of sissy hypnosis porn?
No, but
This
yeah.
is this is porn for an individual to watch, typically a man, that is being the message is you are not enough, you are pathetic, your penis is small, and you should be a girl. You should dress like a girl and continue to watch these videos. And you should start performing sexual acts on other men because that's your place. You should wear a cage on your penis so you don't get erect. Now, I haven't met anybody that just decided one day that seems like something I'd be into. It was a process. And part of that process is that in porn, oftentimes people are seeing body types, both men and women's body types, that don't match up with their own, which is quite fascinating to me. Do you watch sports? Do you ever get down on yourself when you see someone slam dunk or score a touchdown and be like, that's amazing, but like I can't do that. I've never been able. Do we beat ourselves up or do we have appreciation for the athletic skill? I don't meet people, they're like, oh, I couldn't do this. I'm so terrible. But when people talk about porn, there's an inferiority that arises. The porn is telling them we're having the sex here, right? This actor with this large penis and this perfect partner that he's having sex with, that's not you. You're watching us. You're masturbating to us. So that theme over time,
Ah,
you see where I'm going with this? That theme over time plays so a long-term porn watcher will actually get this message of humiliation and it become a whole industry. There's networks online of apps where people pay to be humiliated. Whether their penis is large or small, there's a tactic called SPH, small penis humiliation. Right? These are things that I had never heard about or seen all of my high school and college years. They might have been happening to some extent in some kink communities, but these are being popularized. It's not a small population anymore. And that's just one example. A big theme of content that's quite popular is incest porn. There's a lot of stepdad and stepdaughter and mom swap porn. It's one of the most popular videos. We'll also see interesting things around race, right? The way that racism is maybe unintentionally promoted through porn. I call this, in one aspect, the BBC, the big black corner.
yeah.
And that big black corner is the fetishization and sexualization of black men. It happens to other races as well, but it's this all black men in porn are expected to be endowed a certain way, and their role is to please and provide. And this creates a message to black men of what an expectation is. I interviewed for a research project black men and their experience in the dating world. And many one would say is like, some like my penis is average and it seems like they're disappointed when they find that out. Or, yeah, I do have a large penis, perhaps, but that's not me. I don't want to be sexualized. And so the
Yeah.
way that porn is influencing our culture, our dating, and expectations. So I've just given a couple of examples of just humiliation, of how we objectify certain people. Another one, I'll zip my lip on this to get you in on this, is how would a couple unfold in their intimacy, let's say as high school sweethearts? They may talk about bases, right? First base, second base, there might be petting and kissing. But when they're watching porn, and most of them are, their sex life replicates the porn.
I guess how does this maybe unrealistic type content, or at least, I don't know if unique's the word, but I guess how does watching this stuff start manifesting in, a couple's sexual relationship? Where does the harm start coming, or how does it affect a relationship?
It can come in a few ways that couples are having less sex, that the type of sex that someone might be wanting isn't shared for fear that it will be judged. I've heard people say that's disgusting or weird, we'll put labels on it. They're not interested in that. So the type of sex that someone might be watching in porn would be drastically different if someone said, I'd like to be on top and make eye contact and go slow. Porn is very not slow and very not romantic. Another way is the training that porn does. Porn typically starts with male pleasure and ends with male pleasure. Porn, click, click, open, watch, arouse, finish, close screen, done. It's very sterile and not intimate, and that impacts the brain, which impacts the relationship.
So when I guess it comes to couples that, it's I imagine sex like anything else when in a relationship is something to be discussed probably ideally and each person understands the other's needs. I mean it's a lot of other areas in life or in business. There's two ends of every contract.
Absolutely.
People want different things and ideally there's communication about it. How do you begin to reconcile maybe somebody that's in this state of hyper arousal, kind of, so to speak, caused by the porn, and a partner who's not into that, and they have the common, goal of having, a mutually, enjoyable sex life. Like, how do you start bridging that gap, bringing it together?
First, through education, a lot of individuals are not understanding what's happening. Because again, this wasn't talked about, this wasn't explained because it's just porn, remember?
Yeah.
That partners are you not attracted to me anymore? And another partner is confused. One of the common questions that I'll get from a person that's been watching porn for years, sometimes decades, is since porn entered my life when I was so young, and it's been in my life ever since, what would my actual sexual arousal taste be if I never saw it? Because a lot of my clients, they're watching porn that might not be in line with their value system. It might not be, for example, they have a heterosexual relationship, but they're watching transsexual porn or gay porn, and they're very confused. One client said this to me, and it really just landed in such a powerful way. When his wife had caught him having cheated on her with another person, her response was this: I can't believe you cheated on me with a man. It was that last part
Yeah.
that he could have cheated on her with a woman would have registered in a different way. This just confused her. And he said to me, I'm confused. And when we took a look at that, his porn taste had warped over time. It didn't start there. And I think the difference between someone using porn in an effective way, enhancing sexuality and finding pleasure periodically is different than someone that's using it to escape, to deal with stress, and that is watching it so frequently for so long that the brain is saturated as a drug. And what do drugs want? It needs the next level of the hit.
Yeah.
So the boobs and penis that might have been the typed in prompt when they were in middle school or elementary school, that's not the prompt they're typing in. They're getting more exposed to that next level. And it might not be what they really want, but the brain is wanting it because the brain is excited by it. So that also comes into play, feelings of shame around the content or when porn gets acted out in secret by having affairs and meeting anonymous partners or engaging with sex workers.
And so say you have a couple that's listening to this and maybe porn hasn't, come into their life at least to what they describe or if they feel as any, meaningful way. Like how if we consider porn as the drug, like what's your best advice for couples, maintaining a sexual relationship that keeps them drug free? I mean, what's is any, advice you have to try to keep them from ever wandering into that zone?
To wander back, I think of having worked in the treatment industry with all sorts of process addictions like
Yeah.
gambling or video games and food and sex or substances like weed, alcohol, fentanyl, cocaine, and meth, is that the pleasure that was there is gone. There's a hit and a dependency there, but what's left is the pain, the shame, and the consequences, the broken homes and lost jobs and health issues. When they abstain, they go through a dip. Just like when someone works a muscle in the gym, the muscles don't appear after day one. They break it down and don't notice anything for a period of time until it gets strengthened. So when they go through that rough period, there's a prize on the other side that's more important and valuable. Because for many clients, sex is important, but it's not the most important thing. It's what I started saying in the beginning is what do we prize more than anything, right? Our relationships, our families. And yes, maybe the sex might not be porn sex, but it's beautiful, intimate sex that you and your partner are navigating and doing together and getting closer. The friendship is maintained. And then it comes back to other conversations. maybe we're not watching porn, but we can experiment in so many ways when we start talking. What might we want to try that we haven't? Maybe together. Some partners might be open to read books and learn about how they could open up the relationship in some capacity. That's not going to be for everyone, but that creates a opportunity for growth and intimacy in other areas. So abstinence might be unfun in the beginning. For most people, it is, but there's a payoff. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many sober people walking around.
I guess I think I don't, you would probably know where from, but maybe it was just a Madonna song or something. It was like, let's talk about sex or whatever the saying was. But how do couples start talking about sex if it's not, something they've done? Because it sounds like what you're probably getting to is it's probably ideal for, two partners in a, committed relationship to talk about this stuff. But if it's never really been an item of discussion, how do they get it going?
There's how they can get it going, and then there's how we can change this pattern over time. By having conversations like this, we have an opportunity. It starts with children, right? It starts with how we represent love and sex and talk about things. Our stance in Florida about our health classes, they're missing the mark by a long shot. The couples that are already experiencing it, I think there's so many avenues of resources. Cheating is becoming so much more prevalent. Technology is giving so much away that there's so much happening, and things like TikTok and Instagram are pointing light into things. A lot more people are in individual therapy and they're talking about it. A lot of couples are in couples therapy. What I think would also be more important is that individual therapists and couples therapists receive more training in their therapy programs than as electives or more complementary types of trainings later on. Because the average therapist isn't equipped, in my opinion. I remember if I can share a personal story.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was in my 20s, I had confusion. I was engaging in different sexual exploration at the time. And I had just moved back from Israel after living there for 5 years. I was confused, I was depressed, and I went to a therapist. And I shared in one of those initial sessions what my sex life was like, what my experiences were. I kid you not, his face became red. He looked a bit awkward. And I don't remember what he said because I was just in a shame bubble and I never went back to him. I felt there was something wrong with me, like that he couldn't understand or it was weird. And I realized that it wasn't really about me. It was about him. He didn't know how to handle it. And he didn't say, what you're saying is really important and I want to hold space for you. But you're going into something with a lot of detail, which isn't my specialty. But I want to work with you to find someone that can really hear and understand you and provide that therapeutic guidance. If more people did that, it would be very different. And as a result of that experience, I'm grateful that this coming March, I'm going to be presenting to the Mental Health Counselors Association of Palm Beach County on how our clinicians can increase their competency without going to becoming a sex therapist or sex addiction.
Yeah.
That the simple thing of even including on their intake form, do you watch porn? Are you comfortable talking about the content you watch? Just something like that can create a subtle shift in the comfort of their clients.
And you mentioned children, and maybe it's, I'm just thinking of my childhood. I was telling my kids the other day, you'd go into a restaurant and people are smoking cigarettes and the big tobacco settlement, and they blew it into, I think my generation, maybe yours too, of, you just don't smoke, it's going to kill you. And, now 30 years later, there's not as many people walking around Florida smoking cigarettes. And, generationally, it has an impact. Are there things maybe that, with kids maybe of a certain age that parents should keep in mind to try to make sure as their kids grow and mature into, adults, that they have the right starting point of reference to have, healthy sexual relationships with a partner at the right age specific time?
Absolutely. I think the education and how it comes from and who it comes from. The emails that I sent to Palm Beach County schools in Boca to present my credentials and my experience to come in on a voluntary basis to provide an appropriate education for high school students was met with zero responses. Okay. So I don't know if it's going to happen in the school system.
Yeah.
I think it's most likely going to happen in the family home, and legislation to like ban porn in Florida. It
Guess we've seen
just
some of that kind of come about, but has it been effective or?
it hasn't. It just increased the sale of VPNs a thousandfold.
Gotcha. So I guess a parent listening to
Yeah,
this, it's what's your best advice to maybe not have their child one day grappling with some of these addictions that we've been talking about, porn and whatever exists 20 years from now that's taking it up a notch probably by that point.
I think we have so many resources for parents and all individuals to be part of different online groups. It's a great way of passing on information. And I think there's plenty of books already out there. If we could
Okay.
get parents more informed of the information, then they can have wise discernment in how and when to talk to their children if they think they can. There might be somebody else that's more appropriate to do so. A lot of kids are in therapy these days. A lot
Yeah.
of individuals are. So there's opportunity for family therapy discussions. It's a delicate issue because there's a lot of sensitivity and shame by it. That imagine getting caught with porn. What's wrong with you? Like it's going to be so dependent on each family, cultural implications, as well as demographic, socioeconomic status. But silence isn't the answer. I think about it's not my parents' fault that they didn't have a conversation with me. They didn't know, right? They didn't know. And even if they did, I don't think I would have. It's like I smoked weed,
Yeah.
I smoked cigarettes, but I knew so doing that it was going to have an impact. And I wasn't planning on doing it forever. It was just something that I was into. Porn can be with somebody for decades before they even get a sense that it's impacting them in negative ways. So it is a challenge. And to be honest, I don't have the answers for when it comes to kids.
Yeah.
In my practice working with adults in my work, but it is something I think as parents and as a community, getting together and just even having an open forum to discuss it would be a start.
Well, it sounds like it. And I guess as to those adults, what are the challenges and maybe a couple of the solutions for, maintaining, intimacy,
Absolutely.
desire in these long-term relationships? Because I'm sure that's what really a lot of people want deep
Yeah.
down. They just maybe don't all know how to do it.
Yeah. It comes back to just like we weren't taught about porn. I know for me and for many of my clients, two things that are essential that we weren't taught to do effectively were to breathe in a way that calms the nervous system rather than agitates it. Many of us were never taught that until we were adults. And the other thing is skillful communication, the balance of wise speech while also listening. In high school, we have debate clubs, how to win the argument, TED Talks where people are just presenting. So most of my couples, the number one thing that they write on their assessments for goals for therapy, we want to learn how to communicate better. Oftentimes, the second thing is building intimacy. The vehicle to that is the communication. This is what I do a lot of. I get to see it happen where they're playing out a pattern, a feeling that they didn't identify turned into an accusation or an attack that responded and then, oh, you think I do that a lot? Well, the scorecard comes out, we play it over. How many times do I in couples therapy say, guys, time out, let's take a pause. I say it so much to them that I've now given them an encouragement. As you go throughout your day, you've brought me into this therapy session with you to help you. When you guys notice that a pattern that's ineffective is being played out, say, if our therapist was here right now, what would he tell us to do? If we bring him in, because they say you'd probably say that we should slow down, that we
Yeah.
should take a little break, we should pause, take accountability if we may have said something that was hurtful or invalidating. So communication is the number one thing. It's the vehicle. And that predecessor of breathing, how can I choose wise communication without the awareness of it? And breathing and other points of mindfulness allows us to be connected to ourselves, to our feelings. What's happening in my body right now? Before I reactively attack. I tell a client, and she loves this when I told her, I said, pause before you use your pause. And that resonated with her. She thinks about that. She's like, I do that. Like I come at them. And so that simple, it's the difference of taking that boiling pot off the stove. Within just a few seconds, it starts to simmer. So communication is one of the biggest areas that I get to work on with couples. And that vehicle allows them to talk about concerns, hurts they've been carrying on, betrayals or different elements. Are we in alignment? Right? This could be for the couple that's about to have children. There's so many things that we can talk about from moving in together? Is the dog allowed on the couch or not? What's the thermostat set on? These simple things. I can't tell you how many conversations we talk about in therapy about laundry, right?
Really?
Laundry can trigger them and set them up. Who's doing it, how often it's happening, if it's get it folded after or left out. So my advice to couples is to slow down, right? To reframe and to recognize that in the beginning of our relationships, it was good and we wanted more of it and we got it. And that novelty turned into this reliability. And that's okay. It happens to all of us. It's up to us to realize that just because things are routine doesn't mean that we can have this routine with passion and cater to our love languages to fill up that tank. And in relationships where we cohabitate, we might see them every day. We might spend so much time with them that we're not seeing them anymore. And one complaint that I get is like, I just want to be noticed. I want to be seen. And I want to be seen without having to remind you to see me, because then it doesn't feel as good.
And I might be slipping into my habit of being an attorney in a deposition and hearing testimony and asking follow-up questions. But, I'm hearing what you're saying, and my brain is turning to, okay, breathing, mindfulness, communication. Obviously, they interplay with each other, but communication between partners is so key. So I think to myself, well, how do you make sure you're a better communicator? And I think some people out there listening to this are kind of like a routines type of person. And do you have any, at least I am, any advice for maybe even me on, okay, if I wanted to have maybe a core habit or two as to how I better communicate with my wife, every day? Like I mean, what should I focus on and try to do often?
Absolutely. It's not going to be helpful to learn self-defense in the moment that we need to defend ourselves. It's best if we practice that so we have this tool as a resource that we can use. And when it comes to communication, it is a tool that we're going to use in so many domains, relationally, occupationally, and beyond. So there's practices, there's wonderful apps that have mindfulness practices specifically for people in relationships. Of course, I'm going to encourage couples therapy where they can get strategies that are tailored to their relationship, taking into account their traumas, their triggers, their system. But even the simple practice of going throughout the day and taking subtle pauses to step back and say, what am I feeling right now? What are the sensations in my body? Because it is so simple, Chris. There's only six things that are happening to any person anywhere on this planet. They're experiencing either a sight, a smell, a taste, a touch, a hearing. And the sixth one is mental formations, thoughts, memories. These ordinary sight, sound, smells, and so forth are so ordinary that we don't notice them. That's why we think so much. We live in the past, we live in the future in our mind. So mindfulness is about coming back to the present moment. And this is one of the most intimate things that we could be. We know what it's like to be trying to talk to somebody who's on their phone, not connected, or they're watching TV, but like we're doing right now, looking at each other, holding space. This is the benefit that comes from first recognizing I'm grounded in this moment. And my intention is to understand you and for you have an opportunity to understand me. So there's a training there. Mindfulness is a muscle that we can work out on a regular basis that has amazing benefits.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it's what you just said. It's falling in the context of, talk about challenges in sex and relationships, but we easily could have just taken that and inserted it into probably performing better in business and athletic performance and just about I think anything. So it's interesting what a common, I think, block or component that is to lifestyle being optimized. I continue to see through these interviews and just my own research about a lot of different things. So it's pretty interesting to hear. I guess you could say, is it fair to say one of the hats you wear is a sex therapist?
Absolutely. Sex therapist, sex addiction therapist for sure.
So in wearing that hat with the couples that are coming to you, I mean, what are the most common things you're hearing and how do you go about trying to help people with
It,
what they
it
bring you?
It really depends. And relationship is a living body. It changes over time. And things that are going to interact that is aging, illness, hormonal changes, life experiences like menopause, the introduction to children, our life stressors. All of these are going to impact us in some ways. And it's going to vary. For some, it's wanting to be in alignment with what is the frequency and the expectation of how often we're going to have sex and the type of sex that we're having. This is a key component I see over and over again. Sometimes it's a sexual dysfunction. Working with somebody that is struggling in some way to either feel safe in a sexual situation so they can let their guard down and now experience pleasure. For others, they're experiencing such anxiety that they're up in their thinking that they're not able to be experiencing the sensing of what's happening. It's like trying to pay attention to the sound and music that you just heard or that you might hear while you're trying to dance to the beat that's dropping. It doesn't work like that. You only hear the music as it's happening.
Yeah.
So anxiety plays a role, depression, stress and pressure, unresolved issues come about. So there's so many ways that sex therapy and couples therapy ties in the sexual piece to it.
And, it's I guess everybody has different stressors in their everyday life. Sometimes depending on the season, it might be parenting, it might be being a caregiver for parents. There's busy seasons of life sometimes with work. There's always, I feel like, something probably going on that's bigger in one of those categories with one or maybe both people in a relationship over time. And I guess what's your best advice for people maintaining a compatible sexual relationship? Well, all that other stuff is kind of going on as it always seems to be.
I think a way I would explain it is when I meet with couples that have children, I ask them to rank the hierarchy of where the value or priority goes. A lot of them say our kids come first, then us, and then each other. And I said, think of this for a moment. If you switch that around and each of you prioritize your own well-being, your physical and mental health, your sleep and your diet and your exercise and your fulfillment, what type of people would you be in your relationship? Right? I'm healthier and we have a healthy relationship. And guess who benefits the best? Those kids. And so I really think it starts with an individual's mental health and physical health, creating a safe and prosperous relationship where the children that are there are in a safe home with emotional vulnerability, where they can talk to their parents without fear of shame. And that cycle feeds off itself. When kids feel safe, it increases like the harmony in the home. So that's what I see as a big component is switch the trajectory of like we're putting our kids first because you and I we're not really feeling it right now, but we agree on one thing. Our kid is awesome, right? And we put that energy there. And I think a big mistake, I was talking about this morning with a colleague of mine, is we think that our kids are not aware of the discontentment and tension that parents might be experiencing with each other. Maybe we're not yelling or doing something at the kitchen
Yeah.
table, but we read energy. We read facial cues. We know what it's like when dad and dad are not embraced and when there's distance, right? Or when mom and dad are just quiet in front of each other. What there's a message there. And so kids are sponging up all of this in one way or another. So I think prioritizing that structure that I laid out is so key in helping that.
And we've been talking a lot about, I guess the ways that porn, kind of some of the societal influences, I would say the like porn kind of stuff and just the stressors of life can affect not only people really, but their sexual relationship with their partner. But, you and I are both in the business ultimately of helping people feel better, maximize their life. And, from your perspective, what are the best ways for people to start trying to make their sexual relationship better with their partner? And I imagine couples therapy is definitely a component of that. So maybe we could speak on that topic for a little bit so people can, if they're hearing this, I think there's a big thing about you and I were talking about this before we started taping about, developing an awareness of how, like, especially like porn and some of these things affect people. But what's the best way for them to, get past those effects or make their sexual relationship just a little bit better?
If you asked me what my blind spots were, I'd have to honestly tell you that I don't know because I'm not seeing them. And in couples therapy, those blind spots are going to come about. There's a person there who's non-biased and non-reactive to the intensity there that can see patterns and explain those patterns and how to tweak them. Think of your relationship, think of couples in a dynamic as a cargo ship at sea. A sharp turn is not happening. But if that couple learns some key skills in communication and listening and relating to one another, as well as practicing different exercises in sexual intimacy, they're turning that ship and they're going to head in a different trajectory. It is a process. Of course, we want the quick fix. Nobody says, I have a headache. I hope it lasts for 3 days. I want it away now. In fact, I
Yeah.
never wanted to come in the first place. So one of the things couples may experience early on in the process is this doesn't seem to be getting any better. Just like a muscle that's getting worked out of the gym is going to feel sore before we notice that it's getting bulked up.
Yeah.
In many cases, there's decades behind. There's a long story that they're carrying there. So to give themselves to the process is key, and to do the homework outside of session, and things that they could be doing if they're not involved in couples therapy is I'd encourage them to stay off AI and ask for suggestions there. We have all sorts of stories that point to this could give you some really bad advice right now. Over time, that might be different, but there are plenty of books out there and resources and professionals that offer tips online. And I think to make sure they're professionals is key as well, because a lot of people can
Yeah.
just put their opinion out there on different forums. So just getting people thinking about themselves and how they show up in relationships is a big part of the process. But if they're able to, therapy for individuals and couples, it's one of the most unique relationships that we have in our society. Where else is it solely focused on us? Most of our relationships have reciprocity in some way. I'll tell you about my day, Chris. You'll tell me about yours. We'll go back and
Yeah.
forth. But if it was only on me, it's likely that you'd feel resentful. Evan's not taking an interest in me. So in therapy, we get this unique space where I can just be me. I can be vulnerable without fear of judgment or shame. And with that, I get a competent, highly skilled professional able to say with validation, I'm hearing everything you're saying, and I can supply you with some key tools that you can utilize to tweak your life and your relationship. And if you do that, you're going to head into a different direction. And that's a beautiful, powerful thing that we really don't experience in any of our other relationships to that degree.
I would agree with that. And I guess as you're saying that, my mind starts to think to how does somebody go about getting their spouse into therapy? And like before we started recording, we were kind of talking about a little bit on, like a dashboard on a car, and like when
Mhm.
the check-in engine light comes on, maybe like you need to take the car to the dealership, but ideally maybe you would have the car at the dealership before the light's on. And I was thinking maybe for people that are in a relationship that, I don't know, maybe we can do a little exercise here. Like I'm pretty happy. I love my wife. She's my law partner. We have a lot of fun together. I'm a very happy person. But, and listening to this, I'm thinking like, I don't know, maybe therapy isn't a bad thing for anybody. Maybe our relationship that I love could be like slightly better. What's the hurt? Like how would I talk to my wife about getting her to maybe go to therapy without making her immediately question an inadequacy in the relationship? I think some people might have that concern, and maybe because of that, they never talk to their spouse and go and do something that could even make a good relationship great.
You're absolutely right. The idea and how we view therapy in our society might insinuate that something is wrong. And coming back to like in many other areas of our life, we do things to avoid a consequence. Right? We keep our cholesterol down so that our doctor doesn't tell us we're going to have to cut out these foods or go on this medication. Or if we know that we're predisposed to a certain illness genetically, we might have a course of action that could slow that or avoid it altogether. So couples, it's this living body as well. It's heading in a direction. Most of our relationships feel wonderful in the beginning. That's why we're still with them, because if we didn't like them after the second date, I don't think this is working out. But there was a connection, a chemistry. And sometimes when that's happening, we want to avoid the things that we didn't want to hear. Maybe it's politics, maybe it was their family, maybe it was sexual incompatibility. But over time, those little things become quite big things. And I think how we explain therapy, that there isn't a problem per se, but we can get guidance from a professional. Like, do people come to you for consultations? Like, I'm having some doubts or I'm not really sure. And if I could get some information from you, that information can help me make better decisions.
Yeah.
So consulting, and one thing that I do, whether I work with a couple or an individual, I want to meet more people, because typically in an individual session, we'll talk about the important people in our life, and typically the ones that we might have strained relationships with. And a tendency for many therapists is to validate the person in front of us. And to avoid doing that consistently without hearing another perspective, I say, what if we brought mom in? And mom's always, I'll come in. But the challenge I get, Chris, is if a partner that doesn't want to do couples therapy and they might be reluctant to come and talk to me with their partner, I phrase it as this is an opportunity for you to share your perspective with me so that I can help your partner. Because you are their partner. You have valuable information. And guess what? We downplay things. You know, that I've had couples and they'll be like, did he tell you about that time he got angry? And I'd be like, yeah, he told me. And just, did he say that? I'm like, I look at, I didn't hear it that way. So that might be something about anger or a mistrust. Getting that perspective, even in just one session, really can revolutionize the work I could do as an individual. So giving people a taste that therapy is safe. I'm not going to interrogate them. I'm not going to pressure them. I'm going to meet them where they're at. I'm going to be grateful for their willingness to trust me in this process. It's a beautiful thing. And culturally, we have some challenges. Here in South Florida, we have a very diverse population. And I meet some people where mental health is not considered to be a thing. Toughen
Yeah.
up, right? Get over it. This is, I didn't need this, but don't be. And that energy is still alive today very much. But younger generations, even with parents that had that mentality, are able to get exposed to other forms of information. And even though their parents, I know some people, they keep it secret. I don't want them to know. They would judge me or shame me. So I'm doing this because I believe in it. It is helping me. So there's a lot of variations there when it comes to our cultural backgrounds and so forth.
Oh, there for sure is on that. I can, well, you know it, and I can just see it from, my practice. And I guess for people, and I know that it's probably maximized when you get this individualized to your relationship, but in terms of like some practical things, maybe everybody can do, whether they're in couples therapy or not. Maybe we could talk a little bit about some communication exercises that can help
Absolutely.
intimacy, things like scheduling sex, non-sexual touch. Maybe you could give us, the big picture view on those things, what they are, how important they can be.
The number one thing I would say is drop the word you from the beginning of your sentences and say the word I. If we start with that, we're going to be able to invite someone in rather than push them away. So there's a difference between me saying trick, Chris, you're triggering me, right? When I say that could get you on the defensive. But if I say, I'm feeling triggered and feeling really unsafe right now, and it would be helpful for me to share with you what's coming up for me. When I say it like that, I can bring you in because I'm not blaming you or making it about you. I'm reaching out with this bit of connection. So if we can learn a subtle shift in our language, we can all do this. Because when I say like you never, you always, that person that's hearing that is like, I never, I always what? Because I know
Yeah.
what I could say about you and the scorecard comes out and we play that game. The other thing I would say is slow down, take breaks, be present. Right? Present is I'm here in this moment with you. That allows me to know what I'm feeling. Am I feeling scared, joyful, irritated? And then from that, what's the intention? If we ask ourselves, when I'm talking with my partner right now, is the intention to win? That you know that I'm right, that my memory is correct and the way you thought of it is absolutely wrong? Or is the intention for us to come together and navigate this challenge that we're experiencing? So asking those questions is so key. What's happening within me? What would I like the intention of this conversation to be so that we can pull out of those pattern behaviors of the blame game?
So I was hearing one of these personalities. She got some interesting books. Mel Robbins interview. It was a sex therapist and who has a book and pretty big social media following. Her name's escaping me at the moment. She kind of does it with her husband sometimes too, in terms of the whatever their podcast is. But she was talking about scheduling sex.
Mhm.
And listening to it, initially it sounded pretty rigid, and then it maybe seemed kind of practical. I mean, what's your stance on that?
The way you describe it, it sounds transactional.
Yeah.
It sounds managerial rather than relational. I understand the complexities of our schedules, but here's what I can say to that is we're with our partners for a reason. Oftentimes we know how bright they are, how competent, and we watch them enjoy things like golf or different hobbies. We know that they have this ability to prioritize what's important to them. So if we're not being prioritized, that's hurtful. So
Yeah.
scheduling sex, I would say if you absolutely need to, but let's talk about more about prioritizing. We can find it. I might hear couples say, yeah, I was on vacation. I didn't message her that much. I said good morning. I said good night. And oftentimes the response is like, we're not roommates, we're partners. Just because you're away and just because we live together, I want to be brought into your inner world. So if it's helpful to schedule sex, I think more importantly, it's to just prioritize who is most important to us and what are their needs? What are they asking for? And then with that, we'll make the time because we make the time for other things.
Evan, we're going to talk about your practice in just a moment, but do you have any tips as to maybe a key resource or two, maybe a book, maybe a podcast or something that if somebody wants to start dipping their toes into the water of learning more about how to be better at all of this stuff, they might first look to it before they're talking to their partner?
Absolutely. When I think of a book that I would recommend to everybody, including all couples, is a book by a meditation instructor that I've been working with, and his name is Oren J. Sofer. And
Okay.
the title of the book is called Say What You Mean. And it embodies a lot of the styles that I talked about here today, using presence as a foundation, then our intention, so that we could focus on what matters. And it provides practical skills and exercises for people, whether they use it in their relationships or anywhere, to learn how to improve their communication in a revolutionary way. When it comes to porn addiction, Gary Wilson has a wonderful book as in a website by the same name. It's called Your Brain on Porn. It's wonderful. There's a lot out there. I think for parents, I'd encourage them to read the book. And I want to say her name is Peggy. Her last name, I think, is Orenstein. And the titles of those books are two different books, Girls and Sex and Boys and Sex, where
Right.
she
Okay.
interviews teenagers up into the early 20s. I think it would be enlightening for parents to read those books.
All right, and let's talk about your practice for a minute. For people that are listening to this, if you could talk for a moment about where do you practice? What are the types of things that you help couples and individuals with? How do people get in touch with you? Because I think there's probably some people that are going to be listening to this that are going to resonate with the stuff we're talking about and want to connect further.
Absolutely. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a background as an educator, and I started in this field as a group facilitator. And these days, I have a private practice where I do office hours in Boca Raton, as well as provide virtual sessions in Florida, as well as Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. While I have talked a lot today about sex and sex addiction, porn addiction predominantly, a lot of my work also involves helping people move past avoidance in their relationships, navigate stress, anger, reduce anxiety and depression. And for couples, it may be navigating sexual complexity, incompatibility, sexual dysfunction. And of course, a big part of that is learning and working on communication strategies. And it's a joy. Like I'm just as I'm grateful to be invited here to talk with you about this topic, getting invited into a couple's life as a therapist or even an individual client, I should say, I can't think of anything more intimate and powerful. It's we love each other, but we're hitting bumps. We've been hitting them for a while. In some cases, we might be not sure if we're right together. And most couples come not when the red light comes on in the car. It's when they're at so much water has been under the bridge, and it's usually met with fix us.
Yeah.
And while that type of dynamic we can work with early on in a relationship, even at the beginning, before moving in together, family planning stages, to discuss things that we might not have seen communicated in our family system, in our home, our styles of parenting, our communication. Are we avoidant? Are we more passive, passive aggressive, competitive aggression? So coming to therapy is a great opportunity for insight and growth, intimacy building, and just a navigating of the relationship dynamic as well as the sex life that you want to embody. So there's a lot there for people to be able to connect with and experience.
Definitely. And we spoke briefly about kind of the importance of therapist training and the need for kind of your colleagues in different specialties to be able to recognize and deal with some of these issues we've been talking about when they come up. But maybe this will be a shameless plug in another couple months. But I know you're giving a talk coming up in March to a group we both have been involved with over the years, the Mental Health Counselors Association in Palm Beach. Maybe you could talk just briefly on what your presentation is in March, why some of your colleagues might want to show up, and I mean Who knows? Maybe they can even use this to tease a few more people out to see you in March.
Absolutely. The goal for the presentation is to create greater comfort with clinicians that work with their clients, not necessarily for them to refer them out, but for them to ask questions that I think all therapists should ask. For example, on an intake form, it's very common for a therapist to ask if any drug use is being utilized, anything beyond nicotine, caffeine. Are they doing cocaine, marijuana? Are they asking about porn? Are they asking about what are the types of betrayal that you're concerned about happening in a relationship? So those types of things, there's just a little snippet of things that clinicians can be doing to create a more well-rounded practice to encompass our sexuality and some of the complications that we're experiencing in therapy. How to talk about a site like OnlyFans and how to navigate when a partner comes to a therapist and saying, I found content on the computer. I don't know what to do about it. So to explain what sex addiction is and what it isn't, because there's oftentimes confusion of what that is, to explain concepts like love addiction, as well as talking about different themes that are very common in couple relationships and individuals, that a person's specialty might be trauma, it might be OCD, they might be working with children and are not really sure how to incorporate conversations about sex or porn. So it's really geared towards the clinician to give them some light bulb moments of porn is out there, it's not going away. We're carrying it in all of our pockets. I think it could be helpful to get some of the facts and information from somebody who's on the front line, who's made this their life work and passion.
That's awesome. I hope to be there and I hope everybody else comes out in the local community. So last question I have, I've started asking
Mhm.
recently, and it's sometimes it's a hard one to answer, but I'm curious what you would say. There was one takeaway, one thing that people from remember from what we're talking about today and put into use in their own lives. What would that be?
I would just say that if there's one takeaway, is that there's power in pause. In this moment, like if they're listening to this, I would just pause, take a deep breath in, settle into the body. I think we live in a very fast and pressured society where we're moving quite quickly. And I think slowing down is so powerful. That would be my suggestion, is to pause, to become present, to ask yourself, what are you feeling in this moment? And what's your intention? How do you want to live in your relationship? How do you want to live in your own life? What do you value? And how do you prioritize those values in the day-to-day decisions that you make?
Well, that's awesome. I think it's great advice. Evan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.